Welcome to Holy Heartbeats. My name is Nathan, and I narrate Christ-centered testimonies from all over the world. These testimonies include rapture and end-times visions, near-death experiences, encounters with angels and demons, God, Jesus, and even Satan himself. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you are fond of listening to these types of stories, and let me know what you think about these testimonies in the comments section below. Furthermore, for those who want to share their personal testimonies, visions, and revelations from God, you can send us your own stories at holyheartbeat7@gmail.com. I will be very honored to read your testimony, which may inspire, edify, and encourage a lot of people in their personal journey of faith with the Lord Jesus Christ. The Disney Bloodline, Part 3. A possible chronology of events surrounding Walt Disney's illegitimate birth. It is beyond doubt that Walt Disney was an illegitimate child, but this fact triggered a long list of mysterious events. It also provided power-hungry men with leverage to blackmail Walt Disney. Since this chapter on deception focuses on Disney and how powerful figures used blackmail to control him, this information is highly relevant. The following chronology reflects what this author believes most likely happened. Without genetic testing, it is difficult to determine with absolute certainty who Walt's biological parents were, or to fully uncover the true history of his birth. Several investigators have spent many years examining the facts surrounding Walt's birth, uncovering numerous intriguing and tantalizing clues. This author presents the following chronology based on that evidence. It is offered without extensive documentation because the mysteries surrounding Walt Disney's birth are likely to remain unresolved, regardless of any explanations offered. The purpose here is to demonstrate that Walt Disney had a secret, illegitimate birth, which gave J. Edgar Hoover and his superiors blackmail leverage over him. Walt may also have had gambling debts and an abnormal sexual appetite, which further contributed to his entrapment. For those seeking more detailed evidence, recommended sources include Mojacar, Corner of Enchantment by Almendros, Interview Magazine Issue 242, Walt Disney Was from Almeria, and Mark Elliott's Walt Disney, Hollywood's Dark Prince, Chapter 11, 1890. An attractive Spanish woman, Isabel Zamora Asensio of Mojacar, leaves Spain and travels to a Franciscan monastery in California. Later in the same year, Elias Disney, Walt's future father, who considers himself a ladies' man, leaves his family to seek fortune in the gold fields. In California, he meets Isabel Asensio, another newcomer to the state. The two share much in common, begin a sexual affair, and fall in love. 1891. Elias fails to find fortune and returns to Chicago, but he does not forget Isabel. 1893. Isabel and Elias have a son. Elias convinces his wife to accept the baby as theirs, rather than allow the family's reputation, marriage, and standing to be ruined. The son does not resemble Elias's first two sons. 1901. Isabel and Elias have another illegitimate son. Elias brings him home and names him Walter after the minister of the church he attends. These two illegitimate sons do not resemble Elias's older children and remain distant from them, but cling to each other as brothers. 1903. The minister at Elias's church learns about the illegitimate children, prompting Elias to quickly move out of state to keep the scandal secret. Elias has also accumulated gambling debts. 1905. After relocating to Marceline, Missouri, Isabel is hired as the Disney family's maid. This position provides a convenient excuse for her to live with the family without arousing suspicion. She likely takes on much of the care and upbringing of the two boys. 1918. J. Edgar Hoover is busy prosecuting draft dodgers during World War I when a case concerning Walt Disney comes to his attention. Walt allegedly forged his parents' signatures to join the army. Cases like Walt's were monitored because individuals who could be blackmailed might become valuable assets for Hoover in the future. That year, Walt discovers he has no birth certificate. He notices his parents' strange reactions regarding the certificate and other questions, which leads him to deeply distrust his father. November 1938. Walt's mother dies from gas poisoning. The Disney family maid rescues Elias from the fumes, but Walt's mother succumbs. 1939-40. Hoover offers to help Walt locate his real parents if Walt agrees to work for the FBI. Whether Hoover already knows Walt is illegitimate or soon learns the truth through investigation, this knowledge grants Hoover blackmail power over Walt and secures Walt's loyalty. Hoover reveals the truth to Walt and then moves to protect Disney and Elias's reputations. 2 FBI agents plant baptismal records of a child named Jose Guirao, born to Isabel in 1890 in Mojácar, Spain. This date is 10 years earlier than Walt's birth year, intended to mislead anyone investigating. Since no birth certificate for Walt exists from 1901, known from World War I records, they plant a false birth certificate for Walt in the Illinois state records dated 1890, hoping people will assume a filing error occurred. This way, if any secrets leak, Walt could at least claim he was adopted rather than an illegitimate child. Townspeople in Mojácar are reportedly paid to maintain a consistent story, likely receiving ongoing payments. 1941. Walt confronts his father with the truth, leading Elias to commit suicide. Walt's real mother then moves in to live with him as his maid. 1954. In order to reinforce the myth that Walt Disney was born in Spain, a group of Franciscan monks traveled to Mojácar and openly inquired about the birth records of Jose Guirao and/or Walt Disney. They spent time with the mayor and made sure that everyone connected Walt Disney with Jose, a fictitious character for whom the FBI had fabricated records. 1967. A year after Walt's death, a large group of Americans, needed because they lacked the skill of the 2 FBI agents from 1940, pretended to be on official business for the American government. They went to Mojácar, Spain, to destroy all records of Jose Guirao, ensuring that no Spanish claimants could challenge Walt Disney's fortune. Later, to solidify the fictitious story and mislead anyone who might penetrate the secrecy surrounding Walt Disney, the Spanish government did a favor for certain powerful individuals by hiring an investigator to examine Walt Disney's alleged Spanish origins. Villagers willingly told visitors, without fear or fanfare, that Walt Disney was born there. However, unless this has recently changed, the village has never erected any monuments, markers, or memorials at the supposed birth site. Likely, for years, they did not do so because some villagers probably knew the story was false. Now that the older generation has passed, the lie has probably become accepted as truth, and there is most likely some form of memorial to Walt Disney. Walt Disney's character. Because the Disney deception is such a major worldwide Illuminati deception, and because Walt Disney was the primary catalyst behind all the Disney theme parks, movies, and merchandise, it is important to examine his character. In studying historical figures, this author has sought to uncover the absolute truth. One might ask, how can this be done? Especially given decades of myths spread by the establishment and their media. The following approach, which has worked with other historical figures, was also applied by this author to Walt Disney. The first step is to study everything available about the man, paying special attention to the bias and perspective of each author. Particular focus is given to biographers who strive to present the whole truth as they found it, rather than authorized biographies that repeat myths, platitudes, and flattery. The investigator must be cautious because some authors deceptively claim in their introductions to be detached investigators who will be painfully honest while actually acting as skilled cover-up artists for their subject. After thoroughly investigating written material about Walt Disney, this author temporarily set aside what he knew and conducted a handwriting analysis using the scientific principles of graphoanalysis and the broader field of graphology. This author is a certified graphoanalyst who has performed handwriting analysis professionally. Graphoanalysis and graphology provide an excellent, unbiased, and deeply insightful look into historical figures, bypassing propaganda and myths. Moreover, close historical study and handwriting analysis of various historical figures consistently align, as was the case with Walt Disney. The following paragraphs describe Walt's personality in the 1920s. This profile did not endure. Under the pressures of micromanaging Disney productions and coping with financial stresses, by the 1940s, Walt was prone to rages, treating his wife harshly and administering rough spankings to his 2 children. He sought psychiatric counseling to manage the stress. Unfortunately, by the 1960s, Walt had become a sadistic, egotistical alcoholic. One biographer described him as a bully and a know-it-all. Even then, Walt had devoted men working for him, such as Bill Walsh, who had been an orphan as a child, who worshipped him. But here is how Walt was in the 1920s. Walt was a self-motivated individual, bursting with energy that constantly sought an outlet. Many have written about this trait. He was more a giver than a taker in relationships. In his early years, when responsible for business contracts, he often gave away his work without setting prices for profit. He even wrote letters to his boss emphasizing that his first priority was creating good cartoons, not making money, though he did desire some appreciation for his work, revealing a sensitive nature. Walt would not wait for others to generate ideas or take initiative. He was always the first to act. He communicated his ideas with clarity and ease, effortlessly moving from one concept to another. He would often storm into Disney productions, rapidly sharing one idea after another with his workers. He enjoyed competition and possessed a quick mind and keen perception. He frequently acted on intuition and impulse, taking risks that endangered his own security. Throughout his life, he often gambled all his savings and everything he could scrape together on various projects. Long-term endeavors bored him. Fortunately, the tedious work of cartooning was handled by a large staff of artists. Household chores and repetitive tasks also bored him, so he avoided them entirely. As a bachelor, he was notoriously a complete slob around the house. He was impatient with vague philosophies and preferred concrete realities. Walt was difficult to get along with because his personality combined a playful side, even to the point of cruel practical jokes, with an aggressive, intolerant, and impatient drive to achieve. Those around him were often unsettled because, on a subconscious level, they never knew which side they would encounter. One source quotes Walt saying, "We don't even let the word art be used around the studio. If anyone begins to get arty, we knock them down." He was geared for action and was always inventing new ways to get what he needed. When provoked, he could be explosive. His longtime associates remember his fiery temper. Walt was a man of dynamic energy, sensuality, keen intellect, and a disciple of the pleasure principle. Because his father was abusive and misused his authority, Walt developed a deep defiance toward authority figures. The themes in his films repeatedly sympathize with those who rebel against authority, often portraying police and other officials as absurd. One way he expressed this rebelliousness was through lively dance scenes, a hallmark of teenage rebellion during the 20th century. For example, in Alice Rattled by Rats, comic anarchy reaches its fullest expression as the rats wreak havoc when the cats are away. Walt believed that rules were meant for others to follow. This attitude sometimes led him to step outside the law and commit illegal acts, a trait that may explain some of the criminal activities he later became involved in. Walt disliked close supervision and wanted to manage his Disney empire as if it were his own kingdom. He aspired to be an authority figure and, in fact, became the dictator of his magic kingdom. When his workers disagreed with his views, he saw it as an infringement on his inalienable rights as an individual. He had a somewhat melancholic temperament, a perfectionist who still enjoyed life. He felt the need to protect himself from intimacy with others and was most comfortable in environments he created himself. Walt possessed the traits of an executive, slow to reveal his innermost feelings and firmly committed to his own goals. Walt was one of those people who, when the going got tough, persisted relentlessly, He clung stubbornly to his ideas, plans, and possessions. For example, his refusal to allow his brother Roy to stop the creation of Disneyland caused a rift between them. His determination to succeed was exploited by criminal syndicates who blackmailed him with debt. To achieve his dreams, he was willing to give them what they demanded. A clue to Walt's macabre, almost graveyard-like sense of humor and his high tolerance for witnessing pain in others is that he seriously considered volunteering again as a medic after World War I ended, when volunteers were needed for fighting in the Balkans. Walt loved animals more than people. The only human being with whom he had a rapport growing up on the farm was his Uncle Ed, whom he called Uncle Elf, a man who resembled a cross between a leprechaun and a prune. Uncle Elf delighted Walt by making animal sounds and bird whistles. Walt loved the charm of the farm and nature, as well as royalty, pageantry, and strict social hierarchies such as those provided by Freemasonry. He often combined barnyard themes with royal parades and other regal trappings. For instance, in Alice the Piper, King Hamlin is a farmer who sleeps in a farmhouse. In Puss in Boots, the local king lives in an authentic palace oddly placed in a village. His early film Alice's Day at Sea features elements of both a royal court and an American circus. True to his typical Disney disdain for authority, he mocked criminal fraternal groups and their rituals in Alice and the Dog Catcher, Alice Foils the Pirates, and Alice's Mysterious Mystery. Although he was a secret FBI agent, Walt went against J. Edgar Hoover's wishes by ridiculing the FBI's authority. Walt was loyal to his beliefs and could be loyal to individuals he deemed worthy, but he refused to let anyone have authority over him. Walt was a 320 Freemason and an occultist, loyal to that philosophy and, in his early years, to his older brother Roy O. Disney, who was a father figure to him. Anyone at the studios who sided with Walt when he was angry at Roy risked losing their job. Both brothers were protective of each other and believed only they could criticize one another. Who was Roy O. Disney? Roy O. Disney was born in 1893, and his brother Walt was born in 1901. They had 3 other brothers, but Roy and Walt were close only to each other, not to their siblings who did not resemble them. Walt's full name was Walter Elias, his middle name taken from his father's first name. The Disney family had immigrated from Ireland to Canada and then to the United States. Their father was Elias, and their mother, of Scottish descent, who may not have been their biological mother, had the maiden name Flora Call. Roy died in 1971, shortly after the opening ceremonies for Walt Disney World. He kept his promise to his brother to build Walt Disney World, but reneged on promises regarding the city of Epcot, which was ultimately derailed into becoming Epcot Center. During the 1930s, Roy lived in North Hollywood. His family later settled in Napa Valley, California, where they were associated with local Illuminati kingpins. Napa Valley has been nicknamed the Valley of Kings, a place that plays a major role in the covert activities revealed in this chapter. Roy O. Disney played a larger role at Disney Studios than most people realize. For example, it was Roy who decided to cut 45 minutes from Fantasia so that Walt's pet project could be distributed to movie theaters. Some insiders consider Roy the more evil of the 2 brothers. He handled the financial books for Disney over the years. It is known that during the 1950s, Disney kept 2 sets of financial records, so it is hard to believe Roy was unaware of how Disney's money was handled. The big boys always kept the financial pressure on Walt and Roy, often devising scams to take their money. For instance, when the Disney brothers had an arrangement with Columbia Studio, run by Harry Cohn, they were advanced $7,500 for each cartoon, which cost them an unprofitable $13,500 to produce. Further, Cohn often cheated the Disney brothers by delaying payments and taking an absurdly long time to send them the money he owed. The cash flow problems they faced also stemmed from Walt's constant desire to improve and upgrade the technology they used. When Walt switched to color animation over Roy's objections, Disney's profit margin was hurt, leaving the studio short on cash. In 1937, Walt's repeated gambles on cartoon production ideas prompted Roy to say, We've bought the whole damned sweepstakes. From 1940 through 1946, Disney lost money every year. In 1946, the loss amounted to $23,000. Finally, in 1947, the studio turned things around and made a profit of $265,000. Cartoons and movies were not really big moneymakers for the Disney brothers until it was realized that old films could be replayed on television. Overall, from the 1920s through the 1950s, the Disneys may have merely broken even with animation. This is why, at Christmas of 1931, Disney Studios was unable to pay its payroll. Pinocchio cost $2,600,000 to produce in the late 1930s, an amount difficult to recover from the box office at that time, and Fantasia's original release in the 40s was a dismal financial failure. When Sleeping Beauty was released in 1960, it was also a financial loser. Moviegoers showed little interest. The real money made by the Disney brothers in the 1930s through the 1950s came from merchandising Disney products, producing underground hardcore pornography, and receiving kickbacks from various groups that used Disney for mind control programming and money laundering. When Walt died, his shares in Disney were worth $18 million. His family collectively held 34% of the stock in Walt Disney Productions. Roy O. Disney's daughter, Dorothy Disney Pooter, and her husband, Episcopalian Reverend Glenn Pooter, purchased property at 1677 Sage Canyon Road in Napa Valley, east of Rutherford. This location is close to the Rothschilds' Opus 1 temple mentioned earlier. Interestingly, O.J. Simpson's lawyer, Johnny Cochran Jr., was inside the Rothschilds' highly exclusive Opus 1 building when the jury reached a verdict in the Simpson case. It is common for mafia families in South Boston to have one family member in the clergy and another involved full-time in organized crime. Numerous notable mafia figures, Illuminati members, and Bohemian Grovers live along Sage Canyon Road. The area is also home to a large, well-maintained pet cemetery. Frank Wells' sister and Rich Frank, both discussed later in this chapter, also reside on Sage Canyon Road. Who was Roy B. Disney? Roy Edward Disney, nephew of Walt, is the son of Roy Oliver Disney, Walt's brother. Sometimes referred to as Junior, Roy E. Disney was called the Keeper of the Flame in a September 5, 1994 Newsweek story about Disney's Magic Kingdom. Roy is an executive with the Walt Disney Company at 500 South Buena Vista Street in Burbank, California. He worked as an assistant producer at Walt Disney Company from 1954 to 1977 and has served as vice president of the company. He is president of Roy E. Disney Productions in Burbank and chairman of the board for Shamrock Broadcasting Company. Additionally, he sits on the board of directors for St. Joseph Medical Center and is a University of Kentucky recipient of an Academy Award nomination for Mysteries of the Deep. Roy is a director of the Guild of the American West and the Writers Guild, which are influential organizations. He belongs to the 100 Club, the Confrérie des Chevaliers du Tastavan, and the St. Francis Yacht Club. He enjoys speedboat racing. Roy E. Disney was known as the cocky son of Roy O. He married a woman named Patricia. He was only tolerated by his uncle Walt, especially after Roy made some snide remarks about Walt's plans for Disneyland. Plans which he and his father initially opposed until Walt personally got the project underway. Walt's son-in-law, Ronald Miller, was another member of the Disney clan who disliked Roy E. The two never got along. In the power struggle that followed Walt's death, Roy E. ultimately prevailed and gained control of the company. Although some called Roy E. Walt's idiot nephew, he eventually, with support from his father and outsiders, won various power struggles at Disney after Walt died and became a powerful figure. Roy E. Disney and Stanley P. Gold have worked closely together in various capacities and both currently serve on Disney's board of directors. They are friends who collaborated to prevent hostile takeover attempts of Disney in 1984. Gold oversees Shamrock Holdings, Inc. The battle between the two Disney factions. In 1953, the two Disney brothers and their respective sides of the family split when Walt created the Retlaw Corporation. The feud between the two factions has persisted ever since. When Walt Disney created Retlaw, his name Walter spelled backwards, it alienated his brother Royo and Roy's side of the family. Without going into all the details, Retlaw essentially cut Royo's side out of the money they were supposed to receive. However, Roy's side did not stand idly by and let their share of the profits slip away. They fought back and held their own. Their big break came when Michael Milken and his band of junk bond artists executed a Greenmail on the Disney Corporation. Only a few insiders truly understand how Greenmail works. It is a legal form of blackmail. Milken would collaborate with friends such as Saul Steinberg, Sir James Goldsmith, and Carl Icahn. Milken provided them with the financial clout needed to appear capable of purchasing the targeted corporation. According to insiders, Milken received 40% of the upside of any successful Greenmail operation. When the targeted corporation learned that someone like Saul Steinberg intended to buy them out, its officers would panic to prevent the takeover and keep their jobs. They would either engage in reckless refinancing or buy back the stock from the potential acquirer at prices much higher than what Milken's group had paid. The Greenmail artists would then take their profits and move on. The true losers in this scheme were the shareholders, as the corporation's management spent shareholder money, incurred new debts, and diminished the profit potential of their shares to finance their protection. Milken's group made moves to take over many corporations, including Walt Disney, Phillips Petroleum, and Avco. Saul Steinberg appeared to launch a serious hostile takeover attempt of Walt Disney through his company Reliance. At one point, Reliance became Disney's largest stockholder. Steinberg filed an amended filing indicating his intent to acquire 25% of the corporation. The CEO of Walt Disney at the time was Walt's son-in-law, Ron Miller. Steinberg was a close business partner of London's Jacob de Rothschild. Originally, Ron Miller, a Stanford University graduate, and Ray Watson, a Bohemian Grove member also from Stanford, brought in the Bass brothers to help deal with Steinberg's takeover attempt and to buy and develop land, especially in Florida. Ray Watson was Miller's key right-hand man. The Bass brothers had mafia connections. Disney acquired the Bass brothers company, Arvida, and brought them into Disney's management. The Bass brothers sold their stake in Texaco back to the oil company and used those funds to strengthen Disney. Sid Bass and Chuck Cobb, the chief executive of Arvida, negotiated a deal in which Arvida was sold to Disney for $200 million. Arvida stood to profit from developing Disneyland in Florida, while Disney benefited from the new financial strength this acquisition provided. Arvida owned oil fields, theme parks, and had experience creating planned communities. For Ron Miller, one side represented the Illuminati and the other the Mafia. He distrusted both, but Steinberg's takeover threat could have eliminated Disney's management altogether. Both Miller and Roy E. Disney wanted to save the company from Steinberg. Initially, Roy E. wrote a letter to Miller and the other board members expressing his concerns about acquiring Arvida. For Disney management, the Bass brothers at least allowed Walt Disney's family to continue making their movies. After the Bass brothers joined Disney's management and became major shareholders, they sided with Roy E. during a management conflict over whether Disney should purchase Gibson Greeting Card Company. With enough board votes, they ousted Ron Miller. After Miller and his aligned management team were removed, CEO Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, Rich Frank, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and others formed the modern Walt Disney Corporation. Disney's Touchstone Studio, previously mentioned in connection with the movie Alive, was created in 1984 by Miller. Miller's management style was lackluster, while the new leadership aggressively expanded the company. Although Walt's side of the family was pushed out of Disney's management, they continued to receive financial rewards from various Disney enterprises. The Bass brothers acquired more land for Disney in Florida, and under their guidance, Disney now had a management team skilled in land acquisition. The Bass fortune began with Perry Bass, who founded Bass Enterprises. In 1969, Perry retired, passing leadership to his eldest son, Sid Richardson Bass, who had 3 younger brothers, Ed, Robert, and Lee. The Bass family owned 27% of Prime Computer, as well as substantial real estate and oil holdings. The Bass brothers founded a local prep school in Fort Worth, Texas, where their headquarters are adorned with modern art. The Bass brothers were clever in their Disney deal. In exchange for a $14 million investment in Arvida, they eventually received $950 million worth of Disney stock. In 1985, they liquidated Bass Brothers Enterprises, dividing the assets among the four brothers. Sid Bass then shifted his focus from finance to culture and high society. One of the Bass brothers is involved in Napa Valley wineries. Their financial strategist was Alfred Chechi of Beverly Hills, a known supporter of Mishpucha member Senator Dianne Feinstein. Roy Disney has been implicated in criminal activities, and those investigating him have reportedly been threatened with harm to their families if they continue. Napa Valley's Illuminati activity also connects with CIA operations. The Illuminati families there maintain CIA ties. For example, British millionaire Kenneth Armitage, who fled England to avoid arrest on charges of theft, deception, and false accounting, had friends in Napa Valley such as Dr. John Duff and Johnny Beck. Armitage mysteriously died in prison in England. He had intelligence connections that linked him to the dark world of intelligence agency criminal activities. His company was authorized to provide Central American government documents. There is much more, far more, to the sordid affairs swirling around Roy Disney. Napa Valley, where many Disney family members reside, hosts the Illuminati's Opus One temple owned by the Rothschilds, as well as 2 roads lined with meticulously maintained wineries owned by Illuminati kingpins connected by secret underground tunnels. Among the many Illuminati-linked wineries, including Rothschilds, Mondavis, Rutherfords, Christian Brothers, and Satuis. At the northern end of a series of vineyards along Highway 29 lies the CIA's medieval-looking Culinary Institute of America Greystone, located at 255E5 Main Street, St. Helena, California, 94574. This facility has been the site where numerous people have reportedly suffered torture. The Greystone Culinary Institute recently had its campus store manager featured in House and Garden magazine in September of 1996. What do we know about the Disney family in general? Several members of the Disney family came to England with William the Conqueror. At that time, they were not known as Disney. Because they originated from the French Norman town of Isigny, they took the name d'Isigny, which was later anglicized into Disney. Walt Disney had 2 daughters, Diane Marie, born December 18, 1933, and Sharon May. Diane once made revealing comments about their upbringing, saying, "He didn't spoil us. Like a lot of adolescent girls, I was crazy about horses and got quite good at riding. I yearned for my own horse, but Dad wouldn't buy one, and we didn't have a lot of clothes and other things. For a man considered one of the richest in the nation, Walt Disney cannot be accused of spoiling his children." He was also known for his 10-cent tips at restaurants, which became the talk of the town. Sharon May was adopted and came to the Disney household on December 31, 1936. She passed away in 1993. The adoption was kept very secret. Newspapers across the country falsely reported that Lillian Disney had given birth to Sharon, and the family maintained this lie for years. The official reason given for Sharon's adoption was that Diane needed a playmate. For years, Walt Disney showed little affection for Sharon and rarely acted as if he knew her name. Walt had wanted a son, but his wife insisted on adopting a girl. So Lillian selected a beautiful girl to be a companion for their first daughter. When Sharon was of kindergarten age, Walt would take her to the carousels in Griffith Park on Sunday afternoons. She attended private schools, including Westlake School for Girls, before being sent off to a girls' boarding school in Switzerland. Sharon had soft blonde hair and was quite attractive. In June of 1948, Walt took Sharon, then an attractive 12-year-old, with him to Alaska for about 2 months. For much of the trip, Walt and Sharon were alone together. For a father who had ignored her for years, Walt suddenly became completely obsessed. He bathed Sharon every night, combed her hair, washed her underwear, and carefully dressed her each evening from head to toe before taking her to nice restaurants. He even followed her when she sleepwalked. Why was Sharon a dissociative person? That summer in Alaska, Walt and his personal pilot took a trip in August to Mount McKinley, Alaska. Both were drinking Scotch whiskey and barely missed crashing into a mountain. They almost ran out of fuel before finding a runway. Sharon first married Presbyterian Robert Borgfeldt Brown. Later, she married William Lund. Years later, Walt's wife Lillian even prevented a biographer from revealing that Sharon was adopted. Sharon died relatively young. It is important to consider the entire Disney family, not just Walt Disney himself, to understand the Disney phenomenon. For example, in 1958, the Wall Street Journal noted that Lillian B. Disney was the beneficial owner of over 10% of common Disney stock. Lillian, Walt's widow, quietly purchased property in Napa Valley and moved there in the late 1960s. She bought the property through Walt's Retlaw Enterprises and the Lillian Disney Trust. Lillian and her 2 daughters managed Retlaw for years. Diane Miller, her daughter, also bought land and moved to the Napa area. The Lillian Disney Trust acquired Silverado Vineyards, which Diane and her husband manage as gentlemen growers, as they call themselves. This branch of the Disney family is shunned by the Napa Valley Illuminati insiders, as well as by the Roy O side of the family. Although very private, Diane Disney Miller occasionally appeared in the public eye, such as when she donated wine for a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood Shasta Diablo, held at the estate Niebaum Coppola, owned by director and producer Francis Ford Coppola. Coppola comes from an old mafia family, owns a large winery, and directed Disney's Captain EO film. Locals in Napa do not trust any of the Disneys, especially the Roy O faction. Other Disneys have ties to the occult world. Wesley Ernest Disney was a 32nd-degree Mason and Shriner, a U.S. congressman, state official, and lawyer in Kansas. He had a brother, Richard Lester Disney, a Rhodes Scholar and Mason as well. Wesley began his legal career in Muscogee County, a satanic-controlled area, and was a Christian Scientist. He lived in Tulsa, a powerful city in the Illuminati hierarchy. Doris Miles Disney was a writer of occult fiction, authoring works such as The Magic Grandfather, The Chandler Policy, 1972, Trick or Treat, 1972, and many other occult novels. The story of Disney's silent film career is not so much a struggle for artistic expression as it is a fight for commercial stability. During the 1920s, Walt Disney remained safely within the boundaries of comic animation as defined by others, such as the producers of Felix the Cat, Coco the Clown, and Crazy Cat. In other words, when most of the ideas came solely from himself, Disney's films were no better than others of that era. In the 1930s, Disney attracted some of the finest talent available and began to demand only the best results from them. Supported by the mob and the Illuminati, and driven by a sense of indebtedness to these powers, Disney started achieving remarkable breakthroughs in animation. Between 1924 and 1927, Walt Disney produced a series of 56 silent Alice comedies, which featured 3 different girls, 6-year-old Virginia Davis, Margie Gay, and Lois Hardwick, playing the role of Alice, who romps around in a fantastical cartoon world. These cartoons combined live-action footage with animation. By the time the series ended, Walt Disney was eager to focus exclusively on animation. Margaret Winkler of New York, who later married Charles Mintz, distributed the Alice comedies. From the very beginning, children were at the heart of everything Walt created. The occult forces backing Walt, as well as Walt himself, believed that if they could tap into the child, that part of a person described by various psychologists, they could appeal not only to children's curiosity and emotions, but also to the child within every adult. They understood, even in the 20s and 30s, what had to be achieved in the secret Great Plan for a New World Order. This Illuminati Great Plan called for the destruction of family life, for children to rebel against their parents, and for society to become increasingly violent. Children needed to be immersed in images of violence so that a violent society could be created. For example, the 1925 film Alice Stage Struck shows little Alice strapped to a log heading toward a buzzsaw. The Illuminati also aimed to make occultism and witchcraft commonplace beliefs among the American people. They believed they could introduce witchcraft by appealing to the curiosity of the child within every adult. Consider the 1951 Donald Duck cartoon, Calm Chips, which shows Donald tormenting Chip and Dale, who retaliate by stealing a box of popcorn and scattering it across the front yard. What lesson does this cartoon teach children? It suggests that stealing to get back at someone is acceptable and that playing pranks is amusing. Disney's films from the 1920s depict children cutting school, shoplifting, and playing hooky. They show Alice running away from responsibility in search of adventure, prisoners escaping custody, and hobos fleeing work. These films express that misbehavior can lead to success. What message does this send to children? In the 1951 cartoon Get Rich Quick Goofy, Goofy wins money playing poker, and his initially angry wife, who disapproves of gambling, quickly forgives him when she sees how much he won. Goofy then tells his wife, "Easy come, easy go." The gambling spirit is a powerful influence the Illuminati seek to instill in the nation. How can a cartoon promoting gambling be wholesome for children? Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, a military expert on conditioning people to kill, writes in his excellent book On Killing that the same conditioning the military uses to train soldiers to kill is being applied by the entertainment industry. The major difference is that the military teaches killing only on command, while children are conditioned to kill at will through television entertainment. Grossman explains that this conditioning begins innocently with cartoons and then progresses to countless acts of violence shown on TV as children grow up. Parents, whether through neglect or conscious choice, eventually allow their children to watch R-rated movies depicting graphic violence such as knives penetrating bodies, blood spurting from severed limbs, and bullets tearing through flesh. As children witness brutal deaths on television, they come to associate this suffering with entertainment, pleasure, and their favorite soft drinks, candy bars, and romantic moments. Although Disney projects an image of wholesomeness, this image is highly deceptive. A close examination of Disney cartoons reveals significant violence that could never be depicted if it were real rather than animated. The wholesome front is a major deception that makes Disney cartoons and films especially dangerous. The image of Disney as purely wholesome has led Illuminati mind control programmers to laugh at how naive the American public remains toward Disney. The Disney Gargoyles cartoon series is pure demonology. Its storyline involves a race of demons who protect New York City. One of the gargoyles is even named Demona. Illuminati programmers are amazed at how easily the masses are deceived. How Disney movies are used as programming scripts is a complex topic. Only one detailed example will be provided at the end of this chapter. The Illuminati and Mafia knew that Walt had the ability to accomplish the goals of the Great Plan. They had the carrots and sticks needed to ensure his cooperation. There is no doubt Walt was a hard worker who demanded high standards from his employees. One co-worker wrote, "Walt made a simple statement. You can lick them with product. If you make your product good enough, they cannot deny it." In Walt's estimation, everything had to be executed with great thought and finesse. One major turning point in Walt's commitment to quality came in April 1927, when the head of Universal Studios wrote a scathing report on the quality of Disney studio work. This forced Walt to realize that until then, his efforts had been slipshod and sloppy. He resolved never to take the easy way, but to dedicate himself to bringing his drawings to life with character and compelling situations. In 1922, Walt made a film titled Cinderella, not to be confused with the later animated feature of the same name released in 1950, which was re-released multiple times. The Alice cartoons featured a 6-year-old girl playing Alice. The first 6 Alice comedies had extensive live-action openings before transitioning into animation. After the Alice series, Disney began a fully animated series titled Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. This series subtly promoted the occult concept of luck, exemplified by the widely recognized superstition surrounding a rabbit's foot. Disney's cartoons not only entertained, but also indoctrinated audiences through their storytelling. In 1926, Walt Disney signed an agreement with Mints and Film Booking Offices, FBO, a company controlled by Illuminati kingpin and mob boss Joseph Kennedy. For the subsequent years, Disney operated under the auspices of Kennedy's control. All Disney pictures during this period were registered by RC Pictures Corporation, one of Kennedy's parent companies. Joseph Kennedy also controlled RKO Studio, which collaborated with other major studios to suppress competition from smaller studios. By 1937, the major studios, 20th Century Fox, Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, Columbia Pictures, and RKO, were all allowing the mob to skim profits. RKO guaranteed the distribution of Disney's groundbreaking animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs Sight Unseen in 1937. Disney's films were distributed by Kennedy's RKO from 1936 to 1956. In 1926, Leon Schlesinger, who later became a producer at Warner Brothers, subcontracted animation projects to Disney, including Universal's The Silent Flyer. In 1928, Disney introduced Steamboat Willie, a revolutionary animated cartoon featuring a synchronized soundtrack and starring a character who would become Mickey Mouse. The project demanded tremendous effort and determination, marking a significant milestone in animation history. The cartoon was a commercial success. In 1929, Disney released The Haunted House, a story about Mickey Mouse being forced into a house filled with ghosts who compel him to join their eerie musical performance. In 1930, Walt Disney found himself in financial trouble due to con artist Pat Powers. Harry Cohn, a ruthless Hollywood studio mogul and mob-connected figure, stepped in to assist Walt. Cohn, a controversial and powerful figure, had ties to notorious individuals like Chicago mobster Johnny Roselli. Walt Disney faced a severe personal crisis in 1931, entering a deep depression that persisted into the following year. In 1932, he took a vacation in an attempt to recover from a nervous breakdown. That same year, Ingersoll marketed the first Mickey Mouse watches, launching a consumerism model that has endured ever since. By 1932, major U.S. corporations began marketing Disney merchandise, solidifying the Disney brand as a cornerstone of American consumer culture. Ed Sullivan frequently praised Disney's work in his publications, and Walt received an award from Parents magazine for his contributions to children's entertainment. In 1932, artists previously employed by William Randolph Hearst joined Disney's team. That same year, Roy Disney transitioned the company's distribution from Columbia Pictures to United Artists, securing upfront funding for each cartoon. The role of Bank of America in Disney's rise. During the 1930s, the Illuminati-controlled Bank of America provided significant financial support to Walt Disney. The bank had evolved from the Bank of Italy, which was tied to the same oligarchy that historically influenced the Knights of Malta and Renaissance Venice. In its early years, the Bank of Italy played a powerful role in Hollywood's financial structure. AP and Attilio Giannini, representatives of the Bank of Italy, provided Disney with small amounts of funding during the 1920s to sustain the studio, though not enough to liberate it from financial struggles. Joe Rosenberg, a Jewish banker at the Bank of America, became a close advisor to Walt Disney, attending board meetings and influencing the company's direction, despite not being a formal board member. Rosenberg's advice carried significant weight in Disney's business decisions. The Bank of America, which supported various Illuminati projects, maintained a branch office on Disneyland's Main Street from 1955 to 1993. This branch even operated on holidays and Sundays to serve Disneyland visitors. Notably, S. Clark Bass, a Scottish Rite Freemason and Bank of America executive, served on Disney's board of directors from 1965 to 1975. The Disney animation, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, was financed by the Bank of America. Despite skepticism from Hollywood insiders who predicted the film's failure, Joe Rosenberg believed in the project and backed it financially. When Snow White became a monumental success, Walt Disney hosted an extravagant celebration for his employees at Lake Norconian near Palm Springs, covering all costs for food, drinks, and entertainment. Under the full moon, Disney's male and female employees, temporarily free from the strict rules of the studio, indulged in a Roman-style orgy, culminating in a large nude skinny dip at the lake. Nearly all of the employees participated in this revelry. Walt Disney faced two options: fire everyone involved, or ignore the incident entirely. He chose the latter, and the event was never discussed in his presence again. In 1937, Walt and Roy Disney traveled to Europe, where Walt dined with the British royal family and held a private meeting with H.G. Wells, the Masonic prophet and planner of what he and other Masons referred to as the New World Order. In Paris, Walt received an award from the League of Nations, the precursor to the United Nations. Following the success of Snow White, Walt selected Pinocchio as the studio's next major project. Many have speculated about why this particular story was chosen. Notably, the original script underwent significant changes. The puppet maker's wife was removed from the narrative, shifting the focus to the wooden puppet's aspiration to become a flesh and blood son for his creator. This reimagining introduced a theme of a boy without a soul who, through hard work, could earn one, a concept that some argue mirrors certain programming ideologies. Both Snow White and Pinocchio incorporated occult-like elements of death and resurrection, which served as powerful allegories within their storylines. Post-war financing and the influence of power brokers. After World War II, Joseph Rosenberg convinced his employer A.P. Giannini to bankroll Disney once more. Although Walt was financed by the Jewish mafia, he reportedly harbored personal reservations about this arrangement. Later, Richard Rosenberg, a future president of Bank of America and a member of the Mishpucha, became involved with Disney's financial operations. Richard, whose mother was a Cohen, also had ties to prominent organizations like Northrop Corporation and the Marine Ecumenical Housing Association. In the 1930s, Disney's new cartoons received significant elite promotion. In 1935, Walt was awarded the French Legion of Honor for his Mickey Mouse cartoons. That same year, the Queen of England and the Duchess of York selected Mickey Mouse-themed Chinaware as gifts for 600 children. This followed Walt's earlier visit with the Duchess in 1934. The League of Nations even formally voted to express its approval of Mickey Mouse. There is no denying Walt Disney's talent, nor the powerful backing he received throughout his career. His Masonic membership and involvement with Demolay International likely played a role in his support network. The Freemasons, a group deeply entwined with the entertainment industry, have often highlighted Walt's membership in their promotional materials. The Freemasonic 233 Club, a chapter for actors, included members such as John Asen, Gene Autry, Monty Blue, Humphrey Bogart, John Wayne, and TV DJ Dick Clark. Prominent Freemason film executives included Ellis G. Arnold, Will H. Hayes, Carl Lemmel, David Sarnoff, and Jack M. Warner. Walt Disney's association with these figures underscores the connections between Freemasonry and Hollywood's growth. Walt Disney's contributions and overshadowed collaborators. Despite Walt Disney's reputation as the singular genius behind his studio's success, the contributions of others were crucial. Walt and Roy Disney primarily handled finances and conceptual ideas, while the animators and creative teams brought these visions to life. Nevertheless, Walt received the lion's share of credit, amassing 700 awards and honors, including 30 Academy Awards and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964. In 1934, Walt created a lesser-known cartoon titled The Goddess of Spring. This film depicted Persephone, a goddess of the mystery religions who was abducted by Satan to serve as his bride in the underworld. The storyline followed her agreement to return to Earth for 6 months each year, a clear nod to the ancient myth. The Illuminati and the rise of Walt Disney Studios. The Illuminati have long embraced rituals surrounding Persephone, the goddess central to their mythos. On December 21, 1937, Disney premiered its first full-length color cartoon movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This groundbreaking film required $1.4 million, a staggering sum during the Great Depression, and 3 years of meticulous effort to complete. Over 750 artists collaborated on the project, which was inspired by a silent film adaptation of Snow White that Walt Disney had seen as a boy in 1917. The movie carried an occult undertone that has reportedly been used for mind control programming. As the 1940s began, Disney Studios faced significant financial challenges. During this period, Nelson Rockefeller recruited Disney to create cartoons for South America. The rationale was that these cartoons could encourage South Americans to remain loyal to American capitalist hegemony rather than shifting toward the rising ideologies of fascism and Nazism. On August 24, 1942, Disney premiered Saludos Amigos in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This 42-minute feature celebrated Latin American culture, featuring Goofy as a gaucho and Donald Duck learning the samba from a parrot. The film also showcased vibrant landscapes of Brazil. However, its follow-up, The Three Caballeros, failed in its supposed mission to promote American values. The film portrayed a lecherous Donald Duck who pursued Latin women in poor taste, and its attempt at mysticism was widely criticized as disingenuous. While Latin American audiences disliked the film, establishment media outlets such as Look magazine praised it. Nelson Rockefeller had another motive for sending Walt Disney to South America: to remove him from the volatile situation surrounding the Disney workers' strike. As the government's coordinator of inter-American affairs, Rockefeller held significant influence, particularly given the Rockefeller family's control over much of South America. He advised Disney that the strikers could not be defeated, but assured him that President Franklin D. Roosevelt would resolve the strike during his absence. When Walt Disney returned to the United States, he conceded to the realities of the situation. He accepted the presence of unions and the influence of organized crime in the industry. This marked a turning point in Disney's operations as the company adapted to external pressures and political realities. In another significant shift, Walt and Roy Disney transformed their company into a public corporation in 1940, selling 755,000 shares of common stock. The Boston firm Kidder, Peabody, and Cubbers, associated with the Illuminati, underwrote the studio's public stock offerings. By 1940, the Disney studio in Burbank had evolved into a sprawling complex resembling a miniature city. With 1,000 employees and 20 buildings spread across a 51-acre tract of land, Disney Studios became a testament to Walt Disney's vision and the influence of those backing his ventures. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in our next video.